Welcome to all you storm watchers, storm chasers, and Leanierologists out there. Welcome to another edition of Tempest Talks, where we discuss lean philosophy, principles, and tools, and how they impact our personal and professional lives. Today, we will be discussing the lean leadership legacy with my good friend, Jay Hodge. By way of introduction of Jay is the founder and president of Jay Hodge and Associates, a lean management consulting firm consisting of an extensive network of independent experts specializing in multiple fields, including strategy deployment, lean leadership development, clinical and manufacturing operations, revenue cycle management, Kaizen and problem-solving events, and the implementation of lean management systems and organizations across multiple industries. Jay is the host of 1,000-Year Legacy podcast, which I participated in, which was really fun, and hoping he'll expound upon a little bit more. He's also the author of the Lean Treasure Chest and is the creator of the Dynamic Elemental Engagement System, which is used to effectively drive cultural transformation within any organization. Jay possesses over 30 years of demonstrated operational leadership in roles ranging from frontline supervisor to vice president within organizations such as the U.S. Marine Corps, Ford, General Motors, Caterpillar, Tennant Healthcare, and Toyota. His experience has demonstrated that simply using the lean tools is easy, but succeeding as an effective leader in a lean organization requires completely different kind of leadership, one that necessitates a level of engagement, accountability, communication, and ownership seldom demonstrated. In other words, effective lean leadership is the catalyst for a successful lean culture. Welcome, Jay. I'm super excited about our discussion today.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's nice to be here.
Did I miss anything by way of introduction?
You know, when people introduce me like that, it's like, if you only understood that in my natural state on my property, I'm wearing a pair of overalls with holes in them, working on the property. And most of the time I have a chainsaw in my hand and I'm riding around on a four-wheeler. They think, wait a second, is this the same person? Well, yeah, totally. It is. So
that's so great. I'm sure some of the Marine Corps experience and of course your upbringing, I'm sure impacted that as well.
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah, I feel the same way. People used to ask me all the time, you can drive a forklift? Where did you learn to drive a forklift? And it's like, at my parents' hardware store.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah, it's fun having backgrounds like that, for sure.
It is.
Well-rounded person.
Definitely.
So let's jump right on in. So when I say lean leadership legacy, especially in terms of your podcast with Leadership Legacy, what does that actually mean to you?
You know, a lean leadership legacy, if you were to boil it down to the base elements, it basically means that you can look back and you can see a path of leaders in your wake. Basically, that means you spent your entire career helping others prepare to be effective leaders. It's not about, you know, the plaques on the wall and the things that people send you to say, like on my wall over here, say, thank you for this, thank you for doing that, or the things that, like this right here. Like this right here, I had one of my people that I've worked with over the years send me this beautiful, beautiful watch. And it was just a thank you, you know, True North, helping me figure out my path and all that. It's not about that. It's about looking and watching and seeing people reach their potential and go beyond their potential. So lean leadership isn't about me. It's not about what I've accomplished. It's about what I've accomplished through other people.
Yeah. Oh, I love how you said that, because it was a very different experience for me going from just a traditional leadership kind of model into an organization that actually really embraced lean. I felt like the leadership spoke to the lower level peons,
right,
of which I was, totally different.
Mhm.
And they were doing that kind of a thing. They were talking to me about development and what that actually looked like for me in
Right, right.
progress.
Well, in traditional, I mean, GM, Ford, Caterpillar, great organizations, but the leadership model between them and say a Toyota is very, very different. Is where, a leader at say a normal organization will direct people, and when they make mistakes, it's a reflection on them as a leader. And so, you've
Yeah.
got somewhat of that right there. Whereas
Yeah.
in a Toyota, um, the leaders at Toyota expect you to do the work, expect that they develop you and prepare you for it, and they know you're going to make mistakes. And when you make those mistakes, it's a good thing, because then you come back and you have this conversation, hey, I did this, but it didn't work out right, and they turn that into a learning opportunity, because 5 years down the road, you're going to do the exact same thing with someone that's working for you. You're going to create that learning opportunity through their experience. So
That's so cool. So they're more, so they behave like a sensei would, like a
oh, absolutely.
facilitator would.
Hmm.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Would you say that's like the main difference between a traditional leadership, like managerial style versus a lean leadership style then? Would you say
I, I
those?
think that's I think that's one of them, but I think another point is communication, the level of
Yeah.
communication in a traditional organization, and the level of communication in, say, a like a Toyota, or the organizations that I work with, and I try and help them understand, is that, communications and expectations. So many times we expect certain level of performance,
Mhm.
but we never really communicate what our expectations are, or the levels of performance, what metrics we're going to be measuring. And all of a sudden, people don't know what success looks like.
Yeah.
And so this person's going this way, and this person's going this way, and this person's going this way, all thinking that they're going toward their leader's um, designated destination of success, but they're really not, and everybody ends up
Yeah.
in a different place. And actually, none of those three were what the leader expected, because they didn't communicate effectively. And
Oh,
communication,
goodness.
effective communication is critical to success in any organization.
Totally. Well, and what are some of the things that lead towards effective communication, would you say? How
Engagement.
does your tool that you developed work?
Um, well, I'm not gonna go too much into my tool yet,
Of
because I'm writing
course,
a book
yeah.
about it. No, 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 that's fine. You're talking about dynamic elemental engagement.
Yeah.
Um, Without going too much into it, it's all about engagement. But the key, or the trick, is if you were to go to 5 senior leaders, chiefs, VPs, presidents, and say, what does it really mean to engage your team?
Mhm.
I I would almost bet my annual salary that no one would really give you the right answer.
Yeah.
Um, because most of them think, well, it's about um, going to the monthly open forum. It's about
Yeah.
sending out a monthly bulletin. It's about
Yeah.
walking around once a month and saying hi to everybody, or sending out a ham or a turkey at Christmas. I'm engaging them, right?
Yeah.
No, no, engagement is not that. Real engagement is not that. Real
Agree.
engagement is being involved at the floor level, and this is where most leaders struggle. Is that, to
Mhm.
be honest, they're uncomfortable at the floor
Yes.
level.
It's
Hate to
so
say it,
true.
if you're listening to this, not going to apologize for the truth. It's the truth. You're probably uncomfortable
Yeah.
in your suit, going down, making what you make,
Mhm.
parking where you park,
Totally.
um, talking to the person that makes a tenth of what you do, um, because you don't really understand what they do to begin with. You don't.
Yes.
Um, and it's a hard pill for us as leaders to swallow, is that we're not the experts. Yeah, we're
Totally.
saying this is the corporate direction. This is where we're going to go. We're making the $10 million decisions. We're making the sourcing decisions. We're doing all this stuff, but
Yeah.
we really don't make it happen. It's the people on the floor that make it happen. And
So
a lot
true.
of leaders are uncomfortable going down and talking to the experts, because that's where the experts reside, on the
Mhm.
floor. And so they struggle. And so instead of actually getting uncomfortable and getting used to it, they avoid it.
Yes.
So,
It's so true. Oh my goodness. How many places have you worked where the leader kind of hides in their office?
Mhm.
And we used to call them the fishbowl at the places that I worked because believe it or not, they were all glass. So like
Mhm.
from floor to ceiling, you could look into their offices. It was like they were on display in this giant fish tank. So we
Yep.
used to call it the fishbowl where the executive suite was, right?
Mhm.
A lot of those folks, they kind of hide in their office.
Mhm.
But in a lean organization, one that's really embraced it, they're hardly ever in their office.
That's right.
They're engaging with floor level supervisors and talking to them, about their weekend, that kind of stuff, not just
Yep.
their normal business type stuff. But that's rare when you see that kind of thing.
It really is. And the sad thing is most senior leaders don't understand that the story that they get from, and this isn't a negative comment about managers and directors, but that the story that they get from managers and directors about what's really taking place is tainted because they're also not at most of the times at the floor level. And so the
Yeah.
story they get is kind of, it's got little sugars and spice on it. So it looks better
Yeah,
and sounds better. And in reality, it's flavored, I guess you could say.
totally.
So
Oh, that's exactly what I was thinking. The one of the places that I worked as a side story, our CEO changed over how many times when I was there? I was there for a period of 3 years, and I believe our CEO changed almost every 6 months.
mm,
It was not a good environment
no.
for that kind of thing at all. And if it wasn't the CEO that changed, the executive team changed about
Mhm.
every 6 months, which is really unhealthy and kind of destabilizing for the organization. And I didn't know any better because I was a young engineer trying to
Right.
implement lean. I'm down, sweeping floors under big industrial equipment and all sorts of stuff. Well, I was down there performing some of those duties, and the CEO, I heard that he was coming because you could always hear him coming down the main aisle. You always knew. The entire production staff disappeared. And I was like, what the? Because I had only been there for a couple months. So I was like, where's everybody going? And I found out that he used to, this is terrible, but we had like a tower that was in the middle that was all covered with glass and it was a second story kind of thing. The quality department was underneath, but on top it had like a little catwalk that came out to it. He would stand up there with the lights off and he would watch people producing. And if they weren't producing the way that he thought they should, he would fire them on the spot. So whenever he came down on the floor, whole production lines would leave because they knew if they all went to the bathroom together, they had no opportunity of being fired. Crazy. That is not a lean environment. That is not a healthy environment.
No, and to be
What would
honest,
you do in a situation like that when you find that out?
um,
What would your advice be?
I would probably be fired as a consultant because I would tell the CEO, you're a freaking idiot. You're not a leader. I mean, just be
Yeah,
honest. You're not a leader. A leader
yeah,
actually cares about the people. And if someone's not doing something the way that you think they should be doing it, first question I'm going to ask is, have you documented the way that they should be doing it? Have you trained them
perfect.
on how they should be doing it? Have you shown them how to do it? Have you validated that the process actually supports the process, or the
Yeah,
process actually supports the method that you told them this is what they should be doing? If you haven't done
totally.
any of that, you have no right firing anybody, which means you should
Exactly.
get off the catwalk, go down there, understand why they're not doing it the way that you
Yeah,
think that they should be doing it, considering you're not the expert. So I don't know who that person was, but if they're listening, you're an idiot and you're not a leader,
exactly.
and you should never be in a leadership position. You should be flipping
Agreed.
burgers somewhere.
Totally. Oh, I could not agree more. That's one of the experiences that I call some of the best and worst in my career. because that
Yep.
that to me was so eye-opening about how a leader should engage with their staff. It was
Mhm.
like they shouldn't be so afraid of you that they can't
Yep.
approach you with ideas for change. That's just cutting the company off at its knees.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah,
why I struggle. I know Jack Welch is so well thought of, and so many different people, but his methodology for firing the bottom, was it 20% or 10% every
something like
year?
that. Yeah.
That was stupid. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm not worth what Jack Welch is, and I don't have all the books and all the online stuff that he's got, but that was just a stupid thing. That is not
Yeah.
how you drive engagement in an organization. It's how you drive unhealthy competition, backbiting, backstabbing, and everything else. And
Exactly.
I hate to say it, but kind of, look where it got them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Some of those folks, it's kind of interesting that you bring that up because, he was what, late 70s, early 80s when he was doing that kind of
Yeah.
behavior. Um, a lot of the organizations around that time frame, uh, they were being challenged to meet, some particular bottom line number.
Hmm.
And they thought that the problem was in the type of employee, the type of quality that was coming out, but the quality was the employee's fault. And then at the same time, lean was starting to kind of pick up.
Hmm.
And so the smart companies started to kind of go the lean way or the Toyota way kind of thing,
Right.
and started to recognize actually it's got nothing to do with the people except for culture engagement, of course,
Right.
but it's all about the process and how the process is functioning.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's really interesting because as we've talked before, we both are big advocates for culture first, and then I can teach you all the lean tools you want, but if the
Hmm.
culture is not right, it's not going to stick, kind of a thing.
Right.
And culture is a leadership thing, but it's not like solely a leadership thing.
Right.
So, how would you train or coach a leader that's trying to implement a continuous improvement journey, but maybe hitting walls with up above and below? How would you coach them through something like that?
First thing I would tell them is that, yeah, you are going to hit walls. The interesting thing about a culture is it's not something that you turn on with the light switch. When I walk
Yeah.
into an organization, one of the very first things I do is what I call a culture evaluation. I
Mhm.
ask questions, and I mean, granted, when you first go into an organization as a consultant, you're not going to get the real story from everybody because they don't know you, they don't trust you. So you're going to get
Exactly.
the appropriate, politically correct story. But if I was
Exactly.
coaching a leader to do that, first thing I do is sit down and say, what do you think the culture should look like 5 years from now?
Mm.
Um, it's no different than a value stream map, really. What's
Yeah,
current
true.
state? What's future state?
Yeah.
Current state is people are not engaged. The leadership walks through the halls and they run the other way. They leave the production floor because they're coming down. They
Hmm.
give you the answer that you want to hear. They don't give you the answer that's the truth. They
Yeah.
hide problems. They hide defects. They throw them in the trash can. You never know about them.
Yeah.
Um, they they talk bad about each other. They talk bad about leadership. Well, okay,
Yeah.
what's the opposite of that? What would you like to see? Well, this is what I would like to see. And you start talking about, well, people give you the real answer. When you come out,
Mhm.
they smile at you and they're glad to see you. And they come up and say, hey, I want to show you something that we did last week. We had a problem and this is how we handled it because we used the tools that you guys showed us. We did it ourselves and we didn't have to get engineering, quality, and everybody else involved because we own the process and we
Yeah.
involved them afterwards. They talk about how much they appreciate this other group that helped them out fixing the problem. They talk about how excited they are about meeting their metrics or why they're below their
Yeah.
metrics, but the plan that they have in place. And so what are you at? What do you want to see? How do you get there? And
That's
guess what?
cool.
It starts with you. Um,
Yeah.
and in an organization, I don't typically go into an organization and start with the directors.
Hmm.
When I go into an organization, the first person I start with is the CEO or
Yep.
president. And
Yep.
to be very, very blunt, if the CEO and president is not engaged, the senior
Mhm.
leaders, the chiefs, if they're not engaged, I don't care how many directors you have, how on fire they are, it's
Mhm.
not going to be sustained. Because
Yeah, it's true.
culture starts with leadership at the very,
Yeah.
very top. And if the senior leadership is not engaged, if they're one of those leaders that says, "Oh, that's a great idea. You guys go do it, but I'm too busy to be involved in that."
Yeah.
I already know from advance, from the beginning, this isn't going to be sustained. I don't want any
Yep.
part of it. So I won't even take the engagement. But if
Yeah.
the senior leader says, "You know what? Okay, I know this is going to suck. I know I'm going to have to change some of the things I do, some
Mhm.
of the ways I act, how I communicate, how I engage people, what I spend my time doing for the first 3 hours of the day,
Yeah.
how we run meetings, how we schedule meetings, how we attend meetings, all of these things.
Mhm.
We're going to have to change all that. And it's going to be painful. It's going to be
Mhm.
uncomfortable. But if that's the end result, okay, I'll do it. If I have a senior leader tell me that, I'm all in. They
That's
don't,
awesome.
don't even bother. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's interesting because you've been a consultant for several years. You've also been in the executive suite
Yep.
several times. So your experience comes from not only being part of the team that's trying to implement the change, but also driving
Mhm.
the team that's trying to make the change as well.
Yep.
In the consulting realm, I what really sparked my interest was your comment of I don't even take the engagement if I don't see that. How quickly would you say you can recognize a good or growing versus a very poor culture? How quickly do you think you can peg that?
You mean if I take the engagement?
Yeah,
Um, a week.
yeah, yeah.
A week, easy. Because if you go out onto a floor and people are very standoffish, that means they're
Hmm.
very nervous. And the reason that they're nervous is because you're new
Yep,
and they're worried that you're going to take information to the leaders about
yep,
them. And all of a sudden that you've got this distrust, which tells me you have this huge divide between the floor and
yep,
the leadership. And so
totally.
that's pretty evident from the very first week.
Yeah, it's really interesting because somebody asked me that the other day about how quickly can you recognize a lean environment from a non-lean environment. They just asked me that, and having gone, to different suppliers in aerospace, and having worked in automotive and different, industries, I can I can ask two questions and know whether or not they know what they're talking about with lean.
Mhm.
Like just two questions. And it's like, hmm, okay, you may say that you're a lean expert, but
Mhm.
those are pretty basic things that I can
Mhm.
tell.
Yep.
Um, Culture wise, you're absolutely right. You can walk into an organization and immediately know from the employee's behavior whether or not life is good for them or
Yep.
not. Um,
Absolutely.
have you also had the experience where you go on the floor and the culture is so bad? This has happened to me. The culture is so bad that the employees just spill their guts because they don't care anymore.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. But you know what's interesting about that scenario is that when people are at that point, um, that means that they're actually very open to improvement. They're desperate at
Yes.
that point. You know,
Yeah.
desperation breeds a hunger for change. So when people are
Totally.
at that point, um, it's not necessarily a bad thing because chances are, if people are at that point, their leadership is just sitting up in the office going, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do,
Yes.
which it creates an environment where, okay, this is
Yeah.
where you are. It doesn't get much lower. If we do this, we can turn this ship around. But that
Yeah.
realization that, life as we know it is about to end, it's a pretty
Yeah.
eye-opening experience.
Yeah. One of my senseis used to always say, what's our call to action? Or
Hmm.
what is our crisis moment? He used to
Hmm.
say all the time. Because when this particular company was really starting to make the lean transition, it was in the late 80s, early 90s. So it was right after all that Jack Welch kind of, let's do it
Yeah.
this way. Let's beat the crap out of our employees and let's make
Yeah.
it, give us a good quality, out of our employees because they're the problem. Right at that transition point, they decided, you know what, this isn't working. We're selling furniture to make payroll. That was their crisis moment where it was
Yep.
like, if we're selling furniture to make payroll, we got a problem. And thankfully, we had the manager who was just a general manager. So this is what was interesting. It was a general manager that went to a lean summit, and he came back really pressing for it. Like, no, we need this. We need this. And the president was actually the one that was supposed to go, but the president was like, I'm too busy. Here, you just go. But thankfully, the culture was such that the president was like, what did you learn? Okay, we're going to try it.
Right.
Versus, I just don't have time for this kind of thing, because there's nothing more aggravating than being kind of that middle management.
Oh, yeah.
And knowing what needs to happen and not getting the buy-in from the top. And so the bottom is just floundering. It's awful.
Yep.
But what about
Definitely.
So we've heard a lot about two different types of leadership, which is like visionary leadership and servant leadership seem to be a couple of the buzzwords like floating around now.
Right.
Are they the same in your opinion, or are they different? Like, is it better to have a visionary CEO or a servant CEO?
I think it's a combination. I mean, we make this preconceived idea that a visionary leader is someone who sits in their office and has plotter paper on their walls, and they sit there all day long splattering paint going, what does that mean? That's
Yes.
How can I take our strategy from that paint splot? That's not visionary. And then we go the opposite way and say that servant leadership is all about walking around on the floor all day long with cookies and coffee, handing it out to employees. And it's
Exactly.
not. Effective leadership involves both of them. A great leader understands that your success as a leader is dependent upon your ability to support and serve those that actually do the work.
Yes.
I mean, if you think about it, a CEO, really, what do they do to make the organization successful? They set a strategy, but who carries out that strategy? It's the people on the floor, the managers, the directors. It's the people that work for them that carry out that plan. And all of a sudden your profits are increasing, your shareholders are happy, they love you, they increase your big, massive bonus. Well, guess what? How did that success all take place? It wasn't you. It was you supporting the people and giving them the tools and everything that they needed to carry out your plan. But as a visionary leader, you have to say, how do we not necessarily go along the same path as everybody else and get the same results? How can we do things differently? And this is where I think it's important for and I talk about this a lot in my book, to understand value. Value is the reason that we make decisions. It's the reason that you bought the car you did. It's the reason you bought the house you did. It's the reason that you go out to the restaurant you go out to. Because normally when you go out to a restaurant, there's a restaurant that's a 5-star restaurant, and there's a restaurant that's called Taco Bell. 5-star restaurant costs 10 times more than Taco Bell, but the value that you're going to get from that 5-star restaurant in your mind is worth what you're going to give up.
It's
and
true.
So understanding what you value as a consumer, that 5-star restaurant keeps you coming back, even though it's far more expensive. And so when a leader understands and starts to get the team to understand what their customers truly value, that's visionary. And I run through an exercise with a lot of my clients where I'll sit down with the senior leaders, the first people, and then I do it through the entire organization. And I give them each a piece of paper, and I say individually, write down what you believe our customers value. And the reason I do that is because when they write out their list, and then I have us each go through our lists, and everybody's list is different.
Yeah, yeah,
And in the Marine Corps, you have what's called operational alignment, which means basically if we're going to accomplish our mission, everybody has to be on the same page. We have
yeah,
to know where we're going. And so the purpose of doing that activity is that when everybody reads their list and everybody's got a lot of different answers, I'll say, how can we say that we're aligned with our
exactly.
customers and what we're going to provide for them, what they
Mhm.
value, the reason that they come to us, if we're not all on the same page?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting thing is when we take all those lists and combine them and everybody's working off the same list, guess what we get? Operational
Success.
alignment.
Yeah.
And then that, if you look at like someone like Apple, um, they've done a very good job of understanding what customers want. They don't
Mhm.
want just a phone. They want a phone that does this really cool thing and this
Yeah.
really cool thing, this amazing thing. Or you look at Tesla.
Yeah.
Tesla. I don't have a Tesla, but man, they're freaking cool.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
love driving them.
yeah, and it's they've got a market because they were visionary, thinking outside the box. What do people want? What do they
Yeah.
value? What are they
Yeah.
willing to spend their money on? And so
Totally.
I think, the servant leadership and visionary leader, they're the same thing. The effective ones have both tools in their bag,
Yeah.
I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's good. And not everybody is going to look the same way. So
Mm-mm,
like some of those leaders may be more visionary than others and some may
mhm,
be more servant than others, but if they've
right.
got a good enough balance between those two things, it makes
Right.
sense that they could really drive a direction or a strategy for the organization that could be quite successful.
Mhm, mhm,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Do you think there's one right way to lead?
No, because every person's different. I mean,
Yeah.
as long as a leader understands that they're a servant first,
Hmm.
that they are responsible, and that's where a lot of leaders struggle is they don't really grasp the fact that they're responsible for that guy sitting there at the machining center
Yeah.
who has a kid in college,
Yeah.
who has a wife that's going through chemotherapy,
Yeah.
um, that has a house,
Hmm.
is taking care of their grandchild.
Hmm.
The decisions they make directly
Affect
impact
them.
every single person in that organization. And that's a
Yeah.
heavy weight. I
Yeah.
mean, I've gone through organizations where we did have to make some reductions in force,
Yeah.
but that wasn't
Awful.
the first thing we did. The
Hmm.
first thing we did was do everything else, including taking a 25% salary cut, no
Yeah.
bonuses, me being on the floor in a pair of jeans, working with the teams,
Yeah.
all of these things that we could do, reduce expenses here, reduce this, everything that we could do. The last thing we did was reduce the force, but we
Yeah.
brought them back ASAP as soon as we could. Um,
That's
but
amazing.
that's kind of a heavy weight for
Yeah.
people. And until you are ready to understand that that's part of the responsibility,
Mhm.
you're really not going to get it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Um, I also think there's some people that should just never be leaders too.
Well, they're probably not.
Yeah.
They're in a leadership position,
Hmm.
but they're not a leader. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, we could talk about this for 3 or 4 hours by itself.
It's so true.
We take someone, and the corporate world is great for this. And I know
Oh
that
yeah.
people are listening to this probably going, "Wow, what a negative guy! He's going on a rant." I don't really care. It's the truth. We
Yeah.
take these people that are really, really good yes men, men
Yes.
or women. It doesn't really matter.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, director. Oh, yes. We'll
Hmm.
do whatever you say. Blah 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 blah.
Aye, captain, put me in coach kind of
That's right.
people.
Screw everybody on the floor.
Yeah.
Stab people in the back. Climb on the ladders. Walk on people's heads. Do all that stuff.
Yeah.
But they look really good. And what happens is we have these leaders that are like that,
Yep.
and they progress through the ranks. And who do they pull with them? The people that do the
Yep.
exact same thing,
Exactly.
that will sacrifice their own mother for
Yep.
success. And then all of
Exactly.
a sudden we get people in these senior leadership roles,
Yep.
and they create that culture. That's the
Yeah.
culture that you live with. Um,
Yeah.
we don't take people that are necessarily great leaders. We take people that are good yes men, and will
Mhm.
sacrifice anything and everything. And that's the problem you have with a lot of organizations that are street driven, is they make these
Oh,
very
yeah.
short-term decisions just so that their financials look good, so that investors are happy, so that they can have their quarterly payout. Now, granted, at the end of that quarter, they're probably 10 to 15% low on staff, which means they're not going to make their deliveries and their production for the next
Mhm.
year.
Yeah.
But it looked really good.
Oh, yeah,
My,
their numbers look
my
amazing.
That's right. And I got my bonus, which is really the most important thing.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Some of the companies that I've dealt with where it was, I'm not gonna make my bonus. So I've got to lay off, 15% of my staff so that I make my bonus. It's like, really? Where's your head at? Did you just hear yourself say that? Like,
Right. Well, it goes to it's short-term thinking, and that's
yeah,
part of the problem. Is a really good long-term effective lean leader doesn't make decisions for today. He makes
yeah,
them for a year from now. And
yeah,
the decisions you make today may be painful. They may.
yeah,
It's
oh,
kind of like
yeah,
stop to fix. I
yeah,
really don't want to stop the line
yeah.
because it's going to
That's
cost us a
money.
lot. But if I
Oh,
don't, the long-term impact could literally last for years. So,
yeah. It's so true. Well, and
yep.
it's interesting because the other buzzword that I've been thinking a lot about is being authentic.
Hmm.
Um, I'm authentic in my work, or I'm authentic at being home. It's almost, this is the opinion of Michelle coming out. It's almost like the meaning of being authentic has been faked.
Hmm.
So it's not really being authentic. It's being authentic enough to be for show
Hmm.
when we really should be, we should be authentic. We should be ourselves. We should feel comfortable in our own skin and how we talk to people and even in our personal lives, right? So, but in some of the leadership training stuff, and you see it all over LinkedIn as well, um, be an authentic leader. To me, I'm like, so you're trying to tell me to be myself, but you're telling me to be myself in your way.
Hmm.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
So what does being authentic mean to you?
Being authentic to me means that I'll sit with someone that I work with and say, this is how I screwed up.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
think about it. When you say authentic, authentic means that you're humble, that you're
Right.
real, that you're not afraid for people to see who you really are, because that's really what authentic means. When you go and you buy an antique,
Yeah.
it's an authentic thing, right? That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it's perfect. I mean,
Right.
in fact, the paint's faded. It's probably got a chip or two, but it's on an authentic from 1912. It's unlike
Yeah.
anything else. It's not as beautiful. It's not as finished as something built a month ago, but
Yeah.
it's authentic. And the problem we have with when we say authentic is we say we want to be authentic because it just sounds like a really good word, but authentic means that you see all of my imperfections. I'm not
Yeah.
perfect. I'm not I'm not beautiful in some ways. I
Yeah.
have gaps.
Yeah.
Authentic means that you see the real me. But
Yeah.
if you want to go and talk with the leader and say, all right, we're going to pull all of your 12 people down into a room. We're going to sit down together, and I want you to go through and talk about the mistakes that you've made over the last year and what you
Oh,
learned for them. They'd be like,
oh,
what? What?
yeah.
Oh
I'm
my
not
gosh,
gonna
they'll
do
think
that.
less of me. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
want to
It's
test
all
someone's
about pride.
authenticity, ask
Yeah.
them to do that.
Yeah, for sure. It's so true. Well, and it's all about pride, right? So um the there's so much pride with holding a position like that, and it's
Hmm.
pride for different reasons. It's pride for, look at what I've accomplished. It's pride for, I manage all of these people, like I'm really proud of myself for making it to this position. It's pride for, whatever size organization it is. But what people don't think about with pride is there's a fine line with pride of arrogance versus being proud for a humble reason,
Mhm,
if that makes sense.
mhm.
So like, I can be proud yet humble.
Yep.
I don't have to go the I'm proud and arrogant route, I guess is
Right.
what I'm trying to say.
Well,
Um, Go ahead.
there's so in an organization, if you're a leader, there's a big difference between being prideful and proud.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
prideful. I won't
Yes.
trust someone who's prideful. If I work for someone who is prideful, that means they are very much about themselves. They're not
Yes.
about us as a team. But if I work for someone that's proud, that means they're proud of me, about us. And
Yes.
being prideful and being proud are two very different things. I'm proud of my son and my daughter and my other son for what they've accomplished in life. I'm proud of them, but I
Yes.
am prideful. Prideful is all about me. So you
Yes.
won't
Thank
trust someone
you.
that's prideful.
Yes. Thank you. That's a much better way to say what I was trying to explain.
No, you did
Um,
great.
exactly. But with the pride of selfishness, I guess,
Mhm,
is where I was headed. Um,
mhm.
None of us, of course, want to be selfish people or to be viewed as being selfish.
Right.
But there are individuals that just are selfish, and somehow a lot of them get into a leadership role.
Mhm.
And working for folks like that is really difficult.
It is.
It's really difficult. What advice would you give to somebody that maybe has a really difficult leader that they're working with? They don't really want to switch jobs. They like what they like what they're doing. They just have a really difficult boss that they're dealing with.
Live with it. Everybody, I mean, I hate to say it, but there is no utopia. There is no role out there where you go to work every day and you open up the doors and rainbows fly out and there's unicorns peeking around every corner and there's sugar cookies on every table and there's the lights look like peppermint and it's this state of utopia. It doesn't exist. I mean, it really doesn't. Um,
Yeah.
but the interesting thing about having a leader like that is it's just as good of learning opportunity as it is having a phenomenal leader. Mentorship, and I talk about this some in the book, is
Yeah.
you're being mentored, whether it's by a good leader or by a bad leader,
Yes,
because
it's
it's
so
all about,
true.
it's basically what you take away from that experience. So I've had some really crappy leaders,
Yeah.
and guess what behaviors I try not to demonstrate as a leader myself.
So
Those
true.
ones that they showed me that were really, really ineffective and basically drove me not to trust them. So,
Yeah.
mentorship, you have someone who's not a great leader, learn from them, learn all the
Yeah.
things that they shouldn't do, and then manage up, help
Yeah.
them become, because a lot of times people that are like that, they just don't see it because
Yeah.
they've spent their entire career being led by people like that and they don't
Yeah.
get
That's
it.
true.
It's invisible to them. So,
Yeah. I hadn't even thought about that. They're just behaving the way that they were taught in
mhm,
previous roles,
yep.
thinking that that's normal.
Right. Well, it's like a pit bull. People say their pit bulls are mean and all that. They're really not. I don't have a pit bull, but
Yeah.
pit bulls are actually a really, really good dog. The only reason that a pit bull becomes mean is because someone has trained it to
To
fight
be
other
mean.
dogs. In
Yeah.
reality, that dog is actually a really good dog, but it was never given that opportunity because of what it was exposed to. Same thing happens to leaders. Some of the crappy leaders we have, it's because they had crappy leaders and that's who they learned from.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and sometimes our home lives kind of impact how we lead as well.
Yes.
If we had, a not so good or not so ideal home life growing up, that'll impact the way that we communicate to others in the workplace too. And a lot
Hmm.
of people don't really think about that. They like to think of themselves as separating the two worlds. But really, in my opinion, we bring a lot more from home to the workplace that people don't realize that we do. We're
I
not
agree.
very good at separating the worlds.
I
We're
don't think
really
you
not.
really can. I think you're right on. I don't think you really can. I mean, who I am at work impacts who I am at church,
Yep.
who I am as a coach and a wrestling coach, who
Yep.
I am as a father, who I am as a husband, who I am as a grandfather, who I am as a son. It
Yeah.
you can't set we can't compartmentalize everything that we do in our lives. Otherwise, we'd have 50 compartments, and it makes no sense. We are who we are, regardless of where we are. To be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah, I like that. Because we definitely are, because the more that I've, been in leadership roles or been around leadership and have been coaching leadership, the more I'm realizing, wow, there's with certain leaders that may be struggling in communicating with their staff. One of the things I ask them straight out is, how are you doing? Are you okay? Is there something that's stressing you out?
Right.
Because the way that you're responding to your team is showing me that something's off. You're not feeling comfortable in some realm of your life. And it may be it may be work, and it may not be home life, or it may be home life that you're bringing into work. I had one manager that I was working with. They were so stressed out about their kid getting into a particular school that they were bringing that fear and control into work. So they started micromanaging all of their employees to achieve what they felt was the correct thing.
Right.
And so I had to take them aside and be like, hey, you're micromanaging people because you're realizing you're trying to control what you think you can control, because you can't control the decisions that your child is making at home.
Oh, yeah.
And so you come to work and you're saying, well, I manage all these people so I can control them. Well, no.
Right. Right. I understand. Absolutely.
So what would you say was your biggest learning moment as a leader, and why was it important?
I had a leader. I was working with the hospital once, and I talk about this in the book. Is I always watch leaders, because leaders can say one thing, but part of what I do, and I don't know why I'm when we go to restaurants, I can tell Barb how many light bulbs are out. I observe. I like
Yes.
I can tell as we're driving along. I'll spout off to her. That was a Ford Fiesta. That was a Ford Escort. That was a Chevy Trailblazer. She's like, why are you doing that? I'm like, well, because I can recognize them coming towards me. And she's like, that's weird. I'm like, okay, sorry, can't help it. But I observe, and so
Yeah.
it's weird. I think the biggest learning experience I had is watching a CEO who said that they were a servant leader, and it turns out that they were. I got to the hospital one day, and I parked, and they parked, and they were in front of me, and I watched them as we walked up, because I like to watch people, and he picked up trash in the parking lot on his way in, and I was like,
Wow.
oh, that's interesting. I didn't say anything to him, and then a couple days later, I went to use the restroom, and he was just finishing, and he was washing his hands, and I watched him. After he washed his hands and dried his hands, he took the paper towel and dried off the whole sink area.
Wow.
And I was like, that's the highest paid janitor in the world.
Yeah.
And so, we met on a weekly basis. And so I sat in his office, and we were talking, and I said, I watched you. You didn't know about it, but I watched you do two different things this week. And I said, why did you do that? No one saw it. You didn't think anybody saw it. You didn't do it. You didn't have to do it. And he looked at me and he says, it's because I'm their leader, whether they're watching or not. And he said, if I ever become so important that I can't do every single thing that I ask them to do, I stop being their leader.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, this guy gets it. So, I mean, it just showed me a demonstration of what leadership was, true servant leadership, because he was a great CEO. Team loved him. He set expectations, held people accountable, made decisions that were tough, but the team loved him, absolutely loved him. And that's, when I go to a hospital or I go to an organization, I'll always tell the senior leaders, I say, let's grab a trash bag and walk around the plant and pick up trash. And they'll be like, what? I'm like,
why do I do that?
Why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we do that? We ask our teams to do it.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is when we do that, all of a sudden people go, did you see what that guy was doing? He's our vice president? Oh my gosh. So they're not just talking about servant leadership, they're actually demonstrating it. What's going on? Is there a layoff coming? No. So
That's so interesting that that was their first response. Is there a layoff coming? Because we were so ingrained, right, in the earlier manufacturing years, or industry type years, even in the service industry, we were so ingrained with we're being watched.
Mhm.
And it's like in recent years, as people have started to understand, the lean way and lean thinking and other great leadership methodologies, not just lean, but they're starting to recognize, like, it's not all about me. It's not all about the bottom line. It's actually about how I make people feel. I remember one of my other senseis always telling me, it's not about what I say, it's how I make people feel. And that's always stuck with me, because
Mhm.
I remember how my poor leaders made me feel. They made me anxious. They made me worried about all sorts of types of problems. Like, am I going to make rent next month? Am I being watched? Why can't I do anything right? Did I not learn anything in my university like classes? Am I really an idiot? Like, I remember thinking that a couple times. I'm like, I don't think I'm an idiot, but maybe I am.
You're not an idiot.
But thank you. But it's really interesting, like you were saying, how you naturally display those good behaviors
Mhm.
really does ease the entire organization.
It does.
That anxiousness starts to go away. It really
It
does.
doesn't. I try and when I'm working with leaders, it's one thing that a lot of them really don't think about is if you look at your population of the people that work for you, there's 20%, maybe 25% that probably wouldn't be effective anywhere. And so they're staying where they are because no one else would hire them. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're doing an adequate job.
Yeah.
But probably 25% of your staff are getting a call to two every week from recruiters because they're stars.
Yep.
So if you don't take care of your team, if you're not a good leader for them, what happens is your stars are the ones who leave, not your
Yeah.
crappy employees. And so what happens is over time, if you don't have a realization or understand that and start taking care of your team, all of a sudden what happens is the level of your performance or proficiency of your team, the average starts to drop and drop and drop and drop and drop, because it's not the slugs that are leaving, it's your stars that are leaving. And all of a sudden your
Exactly.
overall performance average is dropping and dropping and dropping. And 2 years down the road, you look around and go, why are we struggling so much? Well, it's actually not the employee's fault. It's your fault because you
Yeah.
didn't take care of your team. You didn't do a
It's
good
so
job.
true. Yeah, it's so true. And it doesn't matter if it's a lean organization or
Mm,
not, because
nope.
you could have the best lean system in place, but if your superstars are leaving on a regular basis because they're not feeling engaged, if you will, then you're left with the kind of poor performers
Mhm,
who kind of want things to be status quo,
mhm.
because if things are status quo, they can hide.
Yep.
But when you're implementing lean, you can't really hide. And so it's kind of like an interesting shift in thinking that happens with the lean journey, right?
Mhm.
You've got the people that are really engaged are usually your superstars, because it's like, oh, they're allowing us to try different things and to improve things. And so I can use the creative side of my brain, which I really
Right.
enjoy doing. And so you get their engagement because they're like, oh, this is super fun. It's a great environment. But then you get the ones that are not as engaged, that want it to be status quo. They
Mhm,
slowly try to kill the lean journey.
mhm.
So you've got to watch both the lean journey and the culture, because if you're not taking care of your people, like you were saying, your culture is going to plummet, which means your lean is going to plummet too, because
Mhm.
your superstars are going to end up leaving, like you were saying, and you're going to be left with the status quoers that are like, this is the way that I've always done it. Lean doesn't work. See, I told you it doesn't work. And it's
Yep.
like, it does work. You just don't want to do it.
That's right. That's right.
I think that's why it fails. A lot of times a lean journey fails because they're not balancing that delicate balance of taking care of your people and your culture and nurturing your culture at the same time of nurturing your journey as
Right.
well.
Well, and it goes back to the fact that so many times when organizations talk about lean, they think it's the toolbox. And
Yes.
lean does not start with the toolbox. Lean starts with how we think about what we do every single day. If I come
Yeah.
in and tell you to change what you're doing without
Yeah.
explaining to you why we need to change what we're doing,
Yeah.
you're going to do it. But as soon as I walk out the door, you're going to go back to the old way.
Yeah.
But if I can
So
get you
true.
engaged and understand why we need to do it this way and the benefits to you, to our customers, to the organization,
Yeah.
and you're part of that decision-making process and that discovery process,
Yeah.
all of a sudden it will stick. But if I
Yeah.
just come in and tell you to do this, you're going to do it until I walk away. Lean
Yeah.
starts with the brain. It doesn't start with the toolbox.
Yeah, it's so true. How would you say this is like a total shift because I'm now thinking not about like industry, but there's kind of the same sort of mindset in leading your family too.
Mhm.
So have you seen kind of like some of your leadership, your lean leadership type things kind of blend into how you parent?
In both parent and in my marriage, being a Marine, I'm fairly assertive and aggressive. That was my tendency.
Fair enough.
But Barbara, so we've been married for almost 35 years right now.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah, I'm when people say she's my better half, no, she's my better 90%. I get no credit, trust me, and I don't deserve it. She gives me credit, but I don't deserve it. But for me, that engagement and decision-making process, what do you think? Because, I do the budgets and I do all that, but I still, every month we sit down and we go over and we do the bills together. Should we look at our retirement together? Where do you think we should do this? How do you think we should do this? And I engage her in it. And that creates that team. That makes us much more of this versus what we've each got our own responsibilities in the marriage.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the kids. With kids, it's very easy. And I've got one that's 33, one that's 31, one that's 19, 20, something like that.
Wow.
And when you have your first kids, you're very parenty. Well, there was an 11-year gap between our second and our third.
Oh, that's me and my brother.
The first two kids look at Barbara and I and go, "Who are you? You are not my parents." And it's because I'm a lot more engaging with Jordan and, hey, what do you want to do? And hey, you might be making this decision. Might not want to do that because of this. Whereas with the first two, it's like, hey, no, you're not going to do that. Blah, blah, blah. So yes, I have seen that. And I think some of that just naturally comes with age, to be honest, because we're and the same thing with our careers. We're so hell bent on being successful in our early age that I sacrificed time with my kids and stuff that I shouldn't have. And as I got older, I realized, wait a second, I'm 35 years old.
Yeah.
I got 2 or 3 years left with Justin and Brittany.
Yeah.
Where did those years go?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's that aha moment. You're like, wait a second, throw on the brakes. What's really important in life? And I wish I would have had that epiphany when I was 25 or 26.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Because you get to I'm 54 now, and you get to 54, and I have so much regret in my life, and my kids are like, "Dad, you were a great dad."
Yeah.
But I think about the things that I missed, the soccer games I missed, the wrestling matches I missed, all those, when I snapped at him for this and that because I was bringing stress home from work. I
Yeah.
think about those things now, and man, I wish I would have had that understanding when I was 25 versus 35. So
Yeah. I think that's why, leadership books and time management books and like all of those things are so popular because we do realize that something's off. something's telling us that, our work-life balance, which is the buzzword these days, our work-life balance is out of balance.
Right.
And I'm a firm believer that our gut or soul or our spirit, whatever you want to call it, will tell us when things are off.
Yep.
And if we don't listen, that can actually dramatically impact our relationships. And so
Agreed.
I've told myself I have to listen when I get those kinds of promptings of something's off, something doesn't feel right. I have to listen, because if
Yep.
I don't, then it's going to dramatically change relationships and so forth. And sometimes relationships should not be continued. They're unhealthy. And it's okay to say goodbye to those kinds of relationships. But
Yep.
the ones that really matter, like familial relationships and close friendships and that kind of stuff, we really need to listen when we're getting that prompting of something's off.
Agreed.
And it's okay to take the lower paying job if that's what you feel is the right way you should go. It's okay to do that. At my younger age, I didn't think that way. I thought, you know what, I need to push to get that high paycheck and, get that recognition of the executive suite kind of thing.
Right.
And I realized, was that really bringing me joy in life? I'm not sure it was.
It is. You're right. Well, I mean, you and I have seen this. So many consultants get into consulting, and from a financial standpoint, consulting can be very beneficial. And
Yeah.
so they get going, and they're gone Monday through Friday. They leave Sunday night, and they do that for 2 or 3 years. Their marriage falls apart. Their kids, they don't even know them anymore. And all of a sudden, they're miserable, and they go, "What happened?"
Yeah.
And so, anytime that I talk with someone who's thinking about going into consulting, I said, you have to have a balance from the very beginning, because you will get trapped in that monetary windfall, which it can be sometimes. And all of a sudden you start budgeting and living at that level, and you're trapped. You're trapped.
Exactly.
So Barbara and I, actually I was semi-retired up until October of last year. Then I had my friend call me and ask for help for a year.
Wow.
And so I'm missing being semi-retired. I'm working, more than I had been, but dang, I missed that time. But it's a short-term decision, and I'm doing it for a friend. But yeah, it's that work-life balance. And and I had a friend told me a while back, there really isn't no balance, because it's one life. You're not balancing 2 lives. It's one life. It's more of a proportion where you're going to split your time, how much you're going to dedicate to this, how much you're going to dedicate to that. But there isn't a balance, because it's one life.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because that brings us full circle. That we really can't compartmentalize those lives. So we need to constantly be asking ourselves, yes, what kind of leader do we want to be? But really, like, if you've got kids, what kind of parent do I want to be? We should be asking ourselves that a lot. If you're married, what kind of spouse do I want to be? If you're single, what kind of person do I want to be? How do I want to engage in society? Because that is going to influence our behavior at work. It will. It just naturally will. The anxiety, that I felt at work, really impacted me in my personal life as well, and made me anxious about pretty much everything. And so we have to recognize that it's one life. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because there's some of these buzzwords, man, that I'm like, why?
Yeah, because someone needs to write a book about something, and I don't know. Someone needs to have something to talk about on the internet. It's like, really? Authenticity? You're trying to redefine that? It's pretty obvious what it is. You don't need to write a book about it.
It's like, open the dictionary, man. We don't have to redefine it.
Right. Definitely.
Well, this has been fantastic. Is there, I would love to hear a little bit before we end here about your podcast, if you would be so kind to talk about your podcast.
My gosh, the podcast. the 1,000-year legacy, it's been great, had great response. It's slowed down obviously with my schedule.
Yeah.
But the 1,000-year legacy goes back to what we kind of talked about at the beginning, is that, when you turn around, when you turn 54, 55, 65, 70, you turn around and what do you see in your wake?
Yeah.
What do you see that you actually accomplished? Not the trophies, not the house, not the retirement account, but what did you really accomplish? Because, when I look at my kids and the kind of men and women that I've developed them to be, or I look at people that I've mentored, the impact that I have,
Mhm.
or I could have had, can carry on for literally 1,000 years. It's
Yeah.
generational. The impact we have, every decision we make is potentially generational,
Yeah.
and understanding that. So a lot of the discussions we have are in regard to that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing to think about. This last week, my aunts came to visit, and it's interesting because you're talking about generational kind of things. We spent a lot of time talking about my great grandparents and my great great
Mhm.
grandparents, and how they, taught the family and how they impacted the family and the things they did in their lives, and how it influences even us today. They've since passed on,
Mhm.
um, but how their legacy really has changed us,
Yep.
is quite incredible.
Yep. It's defined you in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I highly encourage anybody and everybody watching today's Tempest Talks. Definitely check out 1,000 Year Legacy podcast. It's really fun. You learn a lot about different types of people,
Yeah.
and how they think about the legacy that they're leaving behind. So, um, has there been anything that I've missed that you want to share?
No, not that I can think of. We talked about so many things. I mean, we could talk about a lot more things, but I think we've hit on some really good subjects.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's always a pleasure speaking with you, Jay. I always learn so much from you every time we have a discussion. I'm really glad that we were introduced.
Well, it goes both ways. I learned from you as well, so I appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much. And I would love to have you come back when things have slowed down a little bit for you.
Be happy
We'll
to.
have you come back and we'll talk a little bit more about some of those other things that we briefly touched on.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and hope to see you again. So thank
Sounds good.
you.
Yep. Have a great day, Michelle.
You too. Thanks.